The costumes, the hair. There's only one ABBA. And after decades of going their own way, the Swedish supergroup is back.
He has spent more than 60 years sitting at a piano, turning simple chord changes introduction into some of the most recognizable melodies on earth. Now in his late 70s, Benny Andersson has had decades to look back on the group that made him famous, and on everything that came before and after it. This isn't a story built on rumor or invented confession. It's the real, well-documented arc of a boy from a working-class Stockholm neighborhood who became one half of the most successful songwriting partnership in pop history, and who has spoken, on the record, about fame, addiction, love, loss, and the strange experience of watching your own younger self perform forever on a stage in London. Here is that story, told through what Benny Andersson has actually said and actually lived. Long before ABBA, before Eurovision, before Dancing Queen became a wedding reception staple in every country on the planet, there was a 6-year-old boy in Stockholm's Väsastan district named Goran Breer Benny Andersson. His father Gosta was a civil engineer, but it was Benny's father and grandfather Ephraim who shaped his ear for music, both of them accordion players who introduced him to Swedish folk tunes, traditional melodies, and popular Schlager songs. When Benny was 6, his family bought him his own accordion. By the time he was 10, he had a piano and was teaching himself to play it. He left school at 15. Rather than follow his father into engineering, he started performing in youth clubs around Stockholm, and by 1964 he joined a folk ensemble called Elverkit Spelmanslag, essentially the Electricity Board's folk music group, where he wrote his earliest songs. That same period, he was in a relationship with a woman named Christina Granville, and the two would go on to have 2 children together, Peter and Helene, though the relationship ended in 1966. The real turning point came in October 1964, when Benny joined a rock group called the Hepstars as their keyboardist. The Hepstars were massive in Sweden. They were nicknamed the Swedish Beatles, and Benny's songwriting quickly became central to their success. His songs No Response and Sunny Girl became hits, and for the first time, Benny wasn't just playing music written by other people. He was building it from the ground up. It was while touring with the Hepstars that Benny crossed paths with another young Swedish songwriter, Björn Ulvaeus, who was performing with a folk group called the Hootenanny Singers. The two met in June 1966 and quickly discovered they worked well together. Their first collaboration was a song called Isn't It Easy to Say, recorded by the Hepstars. It wasn't a hit, but it was the beginning of a partnership that would eventually produce some of the best-known pop songs ever written. By the late 1960s, Benny and Björn were writing together regularly, and their personal lives had started to intertwine with their professional ones. Björn was with singer Agnetha Faltskog. Benny had begun a relationship with Annie Frid Lingstad, known to the world as Frida, a jazz and cabaret vocalist who had already built a career of her own in Sweden. The four of them began supporting each other in a recording studio, and gradually, almost by accident, a group took shape. ABBA officially formed in 1972, and the name, an acronym of Agnetha, Björn, Benny, and Annie Frid, became one of the most recognized 4 letters in music. Their breakthrough arrived in dramatic fashion. On April 6, 1974, they won the Eurovision Song Contest for Sweden with Waterloo, a song so catchy it would later be voted the best in the contest's 50-year history. From there, over the next 8 years, Benny and Björn wrote and produced 8 studio albums together, while Agnetha and Frida delivered some of the most distinctive vocal performances in pop music. Inside that partnership, the division of labor was clear and, by most accounts, remarkably smooth for 2 people who wrote together for over a decade. Benny built the music, the chord structures, the melodic hooks, the arrangements, while Björn largely handled the lyrics, sometimes working with outside collaborators as the group's career progressed. Benny sang lead vocals only once across ABBA's entire catalog, on a song called Susie Hang Around from the Waterloo album. He was, by design and by temperament, the architect working just off center stage. What set ABBA's sound apart, and what critics and musicologists have pointed to for decades, was the tension Benny built into supposedly happy songs. Even ABBA's brightest, most danceable hits often carry minor key shifts and melancholic undertones beneath their pop shine. Benny himself has connected this directly to his Swedish upbringing. When ABBA was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2010, he stood on stage in New York, reunited briefly with Frida, and spoke about how growing up in a country with months of winter darkness shapes an artist's sensibility, pointing to that same wintry, melancholic thread running through Scandinavian folk music, through the work of composers like Sibelius and Grieg, and, in his view, through ABBA's own songs. Both couples in ABBA married during the years the group was together. Bjorn and Agnetha wed in 1971. Benny and Frida married on October 6, 1978, right in the middle of ABBA's most explosive run of global fame. But fame, touring schedules, and the strange pressure of being permanently visible took a toll on both marriages. Bjorn and Agnetha divorced in 1980. Benny and Frida separated that same year and officially divorced in 1981. These weren't secrets the band tried to hide, and they weren't hidden in ABBA's music either. The band's later albums, particularly songs like The Winner Takes It All and One of Us, are widely understood, including by Benny and Bjorn themselves in various interviews over the years, to reflect the real emotional wreckage of those two marriages breaking apart while the four of them still had to write, record, and perform together. It's one of the more remarkable facts about ABBA's story. Some of their most devastating breakup songs were written and recorded by the very people going through the breakups, sitting across the same studio table from each other. Not long after his divorce from Frida, in December 1981, Benny married Swedish television presenter Mona Norklit. That marriage has lasted more than 4 decades. Benny and Mona have a son, Ludvig Andersson, born in 1982, who has gone on to build his own career in the entertainment industry, including as one of the producers behind ABBA Voyage, the concert residency built around digital recreations of his father's band. ABBA didn't break up with a press conference or a dramatic falling out. There was no official announcement. The group simply stopped working together after 1982, worn down by the accumulated weight of 2 divorces playing out inside one working band, years of relentless touring, and, as Benny and Bjorn have both said in later interviews, a sense that the creative chemistry that had powered the band for a decade had quietly run its course. The group's final studio album, The Visitors, released in 1981, is often cited by critics as ABBA's darkest and most emotionally complex record, a clear reflection of where all 4 members were in their lives at that point. 4 years afterward, reunion questions followed all 4 members everywhere they went, and for years, the answer was consistently no. Bjorn Ulvaeus was particularly blunt about it in interviews over the following decades, repeatedly ruling out any traditional reunion tour. What the public didn't expect was that Benny and Bjorn's musical partnership never actually stopped. It just moved away from pop music entirely. Almost immediately after ABBA wound down, Benny and Bjorn turned to musical theater. Their first major post-ABBA project was Chess, a concept album and later a full-stage musical written with lyricist Tim Rice. The Chess concept album, released in 1984, sold 2 million copies worldwide and produced the hit I Know Him So Well, sung by Elaine Paige and Barbara Dickson, which topped the UK charts. The musical itself opened in London's West End in 1986 and ran for roughly 3 years, though a reworked Broadway version in 1988 struggled and closed within 2 months. Chess has continued to be rest-aged over the decades, including a Broadway revival in 2025. Benny also pursued deeply personal projects rooted in his own Swedish folk background, the music he'd grown up on with his father and grandfather's accordions. In 1987, he released his first solo album, Klinga Mina Klockor, built around Swedish folk compositions, featuring his own accordion playing alongside a folk group called Orsa Spellman. Frida even contributed vocals to the album's title track. He followed it with a second solo record, November 1989. In 1995, Benny and Bjorn's most ambitious post-ABBA project premiered in Malmö, Kristina Fran de Vemela, a musical based on Vilhelm Moberg's novels about Swedish emigration to America in the 19th century. It became one of the most significant works of Swedish musical theater, later staged in English as Kristina, including concert performances at Carnegie Hall in New York and the Royal Albert Hall in London. Then, in 1999, came Mamma Mia, a jukebox musical built around 24 of ABBA's songs, developed with playwright Katherine Johnson. It opened in London's West End and became a genuine phenomenon, eventually reaching Broadway, Toronto, and dozens of countries worldwide. Benny served as an executive producer on both the 2008 film adaptation, starring Meryl Streep, and its 2018 sequel. The film became the highest-grossing movie musical of its era and, in the UK, the best-selling DVD ever released. Since 2001, Benny has also led his own touring outfit, Benny Andersson's Orchestra, BAO for short, a 16-piece band blending Swedish folk, pop, and classical influences, often performing with vocalists Helen Sjöholm and Tommy Körberg. BAO has released multiple albums that became major hits in Sweden, including a single that spent 243 weeks on the Swedish charts, a national record. One part of Benny's story that he has spoken about candidly, without embellishment, is his struggle with alcohol. Andersson has confirmed in interviews that he battled alcoholism through much of his adult life, including during ABBA's most famous years, and that he has remained sober since 2001. He has not turned this into a dramatic tale of rock-bottom collapse. He has simply acknowledged it as part of his history, a private struggle he doesn't dwell on but also doesn't hide. It stands as one of the more grounded human details in a career otherwise defined by global success. For nearly 40 years, ABBA's four members maintained, consistently, that there would be no comeback. Then, in September 2021, they announced Voyage, their first new studio album since 1981's The Visitors. Benny has described the sessions as beginning almost by accident. The plan was originally to record just one or two new songs to premiere during a proposed television special. It went so well, and the four of them found they could still sing and still make music together in the studio, that they kept going until they had a full album's worth of material. Ultimately, 12 songs were developed, though only 10 made the final track list. Alongside the album came something far stranger and more ambitious: ABBA Voyage, a concert residency built around digital avatars, nicknamed ABBA, of the group as they appeared in 1979, created using motion capture technology and visual effects work from Industrial Light and Magic, the company behind Star Wars. The concerts opened in a purpose-built venue in London in May 2022, backed by a live 10-piece band, and have become one of the most successful live music experiences in history. As of early 2026, the residency had drawn more than 4 million attendees and is estimated to have contributed over £2 billion to the UK economy, with performances now extended into 2027. Benny has spoken about the strangeness and the pride of watching a digital, 30-something version of himself perform music he wrote half a century ago, night after night, to sold-out crowds who weren't even born when ABBA first split up. When asked repeatedly whether more new music might follow Voyage, Benny and Bjorn have generally suggested they see the album as a complete, closed chapter rather than the start of a new one, while also acknowledging, more than once, that additional material was explored during those sessions that never made the final cut. It's left the door open, just slightly, for future archival releases, even if neither man has promised a proper sequel. Strip away the speculation, and what remains is a musician who has been unusually consistent and unusually modest about his own role in one of the biggest pop stories of the 20th century. Benny has never presented himself as ABBA's tortured, hidden genius, silently suffering behind a piano while others took the spotlight. What he has done, across decades of interviews, is describe himself plainly: a craftsman more comfortable expressing himself through a chord progression than through conversation, a songwriter who has always found the emotional core of Sweden's long winters and folk traditions more interesting than the surface gloss of pop stardom, and a man who has been honest about both his failed first marriage and his struggles with drinking without turning either into a spectacle. At 79 now, Benny Andersson isn't chasing a comeback or trying to rewrite his own legacy. He still shows up, largely out of the spotlight, at RMV Studios on the island of Skepsholmen in Stockholm, a studio he co-owns with his son Ludwig, doing the same thing he's done since he was 6 years old with an accordion in his hands, building melodies, one chord at a time, and letting the music say the rest. That's the real story, not the manufactured confession the internet loves to recycle, but the documented one: a working-class Stockholm kid, an accordion, a decade of pop history, 2 divorces that became some of the saddest songs ever written, a run of musicals that outlasted the band itself, a private battle with addiction he chose to be honest about, and a strange, glowing hologram of his younger self still performing nightly in London, 20 years after most people assumed ABBA's story was finished. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this look at Benny Andersson's real history, consider following for more accurate deep dives into the artists behind the music you grew up with.